Welcome to the Uncanny Academy of X-Men Lore. I am Jared, and what I noticed looking at the YouTube channel is that some of our most popular videos are when Lad or Mitch and I go through like our top 5 favorite storylines in comics or so forth and so forth. So I decided let's do that except for the X-Men because there's a lot of X-Men storylines that I really enjoyed, particularly recently, that I wanted to share with you guys. Now, note, some of the most well-known X-Men storylines may not be on this list because this is the list of stuff that I've actually personally read. So Phoenix unfortunately won't be on there because I haven't read the storyline. What I'll do is I'll do an updated version of this every so often so that as I discover like Phoenix, I can put that on the list where I think it lines up. But of the storylines I've read, here are the top 5 favorite X-Men storylines of that I have personally read. So I'm going to start with part 5, Astonishing X-Men arc called Gifted by Joss Whedon and art by John Cassaday. So the reason why I like this story is because first off, we get to see we have like a lot of badass Wolverine moments, like where Colossus throws him at this alien ship, and Wolverine punches in through the windshield and puts his fist in the dude's mouth and goes, "Okay, so if you bite my hand off, I'll heal. But if I pop my claws, you won't heal. So land the ship." Just love that. Love that moment. Now we have a very interesting depiction of Emma Frost. She's very like cool and a little cold, pun intended. I like this scene because when Shadowcat first shows up at the Xavier Institute, they're like, okay, they're like, I love where Kitty Pryde goes to Emma Frost. She goes, "I'm sorry I'm late. I was just remembering to put all my clothes on," because Emma Frost dresses very provocatively. So I really love that moment. That's like one of the that's like one of my highlight moments. Also, we get to see Cyclops as like a big leader of the X-Men. I think that this was kind of of the ones that I've read, this is the one where he was the most like nice leader, if you will, instead of like the more, I guess, ruthless could be a word to describe it. I didn't mind it, but that's besides the point. And then I like this lineup because you have Kitty Pryde, you have Beast, you have Cyclops, Wolverine, Emma Frost. I also like, so there's that scene where Colossus comes back. So here's the storyline. Kitty Pryde is being chased down this hallway. She stops at this door. The door opens. This guard fires his gun. The bullet goes right through her because she turned intangible, and the bullet phases through her and just pings off this dude's chest. All of a sudden, you turn around, it's Colossus, and he runs through her because, again, she's intangible, and just starts like pummeling these guards. Now, the reason why this is significant is because previous to that, Colossus was killed because you had earlier the storyline of the legacy virus, which is basically mutant AIDS. So he died from that to develop a cure because Beast came up with a cure and said we need a mutant to power up in order to disperse the cure. Unfortunately, that's going to kill them. So Colossus did it. So that's Gifted. Next, House of M. Oh man, camera's messing up. Give me 1 second, people. But anyway, so we got House of M. So the reason why I like House of M, I'll wait till the camera gets back on. The reason why I like House of M is because it's one of those storylines where, hang on, it's one of those, there you go, House of M. So I liked how, first off, I really liked how the story basically places the characters in an alternate reality where everyone gets what they want. Wolverine remembers everything. Spider-Man lives in a world with Uncle Ben and Gwen Stacy. Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers is like the most famous superhero. And another key point here, mutants are the dominant species instead of humans. That is very key here. And by the way, House of M was written by Brian Michael Bendis and art by Olivier Coipel, one of my favorite creative teams of Marvel. But anyway, so you also have like Magneto is like the ruler of the world because apparently he saved some some mutants or something like that. And so he's the rule of the world. Cyclops and Emma Frost are married. And then it turns out that the reason why this is undone, and this gets into another point on my notes that why I really like the story, is because, once again, like I said before, Wolverine remembers everything. Because the only thing he's ever wanted previous to this was to remember who he is. So when Scarlet Witch reset the world and gave everyone what they wanted, Wolverine remembers everything, including his life and the way the reality was before House of M. So he has to be the one to go around and tell people this is not the way it's supposed to go. This is not the way. We have a major problem here, guys. This is not the way reality is. So then also we have, I like, let's see. I liked how it depicted Spider-Man, because so in this reality, when Spider-Man gets his memories back, he essentially realizes that he has to kill, that he has to like get rid of Uncle Ben and Gwen Stacy again. By get rid of, I mean undo everything, because this is not the way it's supposed to be. Which I think was like one of the most heartbreaking points for Spider-Man, because remember, he's the only thing he's ever wanted was to marry Gwen Stacy and then to live in a world with Uncle Ben. It's like, really, that's one of the key moments here. And then you get this world where all that is given to him. And in fact, when everything reverts back to normal, he wants Doctor Strange to like mind whammy him so he doesn't remember anything about M. Which, yeah, that's really interesting there. I love that point there. So now what else? So what else I found was pretty interesting about this? First off, the art is fantastic. Coppel does a fantastic job. And then I liked how, one of the things I really liked was this scene where, so the X-Men steal a helicarrier, the heroes steal a helicarrier to get to where Magneto is having this event, this sort of gala thing for like to honor him, and they just crash a Sentinel right into him. Well, if they don't, what happens is that they essentially threw a Sentinel at him, and then Magneto and his daughter Polaris cast the Sentinel and destroy it. But then the mutants in this dope double-page spread just pour out. It's not just the mutants. By the way, can I say one thing? I love this Spider-Man costume. Look at that. That's a really cool Spider-Man costume. So the heroes fight. And then I liked how they revealed, like, oh yeah, it wasn't really Scarlet Witch or Magneto that was behind this, because the heroes' idea previous, when they were preparing to go after Wanda, was, okay, it must have been Magneto that made her do this, because Magneto's always wanted to live in the world where mutants are dominant, and that's what this world is. But it turns out, so it was Wanda at the urging of Quicksilver, because at the beginning of the story, this was after Avengers disassembled, and everyone was concerned about Wanda because she basically wrecked the Avengers. So one of the options available was to kill her. So what Quicksilver did is he convinced her to like change the world and then give everyone what they wanted and wipe their memories so they won't remember the previous timeline and thus won't resist. They won't know what the previous world was. When they do know, there's a chance they may not want to go back. So that's what leads to the House of M situation. Also leads to the disappearance of Charles Xavier, which I further think is very interesting. So then, and the return of Hawkeye, because he was dead in Avengers Disassembled, I believe. And then finally, this is the storyline that presents the whole no more mutants thing that was only stopped because of Doctor Strange and Emma Frost putting a psychic bubble around the mutants that were there. And what this event did is it depowered like a significant number of the mutants. They went from like, I thought it was like 1,500 or so to like 200. So they lost a significant number of people. So the mutants were on the brink of extinction, which really they're always at the brink of extinction when you think about it. And then again, but one of the holdovers from this event was Wolverine now remembers everything. It wasn't just undone, which I find is pretty cool. So let's see, what else do I want to talk about with House of M? Just because it sets up a lot of the, it also sets up a lot of the X-Men era up until like, I would say AVX or so. Yeah, pretty much from here until AVX, that's all. I call that the House of M era, because House of M starts in, I think AVX ends it. So that's AVX. My next favorite storyline is, and we did I think we did House of M on the channel, Second Coming. Now I have a lot of reasons why I love this book. My first favorite reason is okay. So this storyline is basically the introduction of Hope Summers as we know her now, in the modern world with the X-Men, which is basically she's like the mutant messiah. She was the first mutant born since House of M. So you're seeing why we started with this when we started doing X-Men stories. Now, what's cool about it, and one of the things that I really enjoyed when I was reading this book, is the idea that so it juggles all of the different X-Men teams, but makes it so they're coordinated to the point where it's like a military unit. You have Squad A doing this, you have X-Force doing this, you have the normal X-Men team doing this. And in fact, there's a scene where, okay, so at the same time as the mutants are defending from wave after wave of Sentinels being sent in through a portal from the future, Cyclops sends X-Force with Cable, and that's Cable right there, to the future to take out the Sentinel factory that's sending these super Sentinels through so they could like survive. So I 100% really loved the whole like military coordination that Cyclops seemed to have with the X-Men. It's another one. It's another example where we see his acumen as a leader. So also another part I liked about it is that you also have the X-Men reacting to the whole idea that there is this secretive team of mutants that kill people. In fact, what's interesting is that the way they discover this in this book is that they're tracking these human extremists that are targeting Hope and Cable. So they take them down, all well and good, and then they're interrogating one of these people, and X-23 Laura Kinney just kills this prisoner, and Nightcrawler's like, "What are you doing? He was an unarmed prisoner." And then he starts asking questions about X-Force, and then even Emma Frost, as she's reading everyone's mind, she's like, "Scott, they're about to ask about X-Force. This is not good." And then Scott like owns up to the whole existence of this mutant Black Ops team. But I just that was one of the moments where I was like, "Oh, this is so cool," because I thought the X-Men knew about X-Force. And it turns out they didn't. It was a secret. And it turns out this is a source of major contention later on in the book, because at this point, when the rest of the X-Men find out, it basically leads to a de-establishment, I guess, of Storm and Wolverine's friendship, because Wolverine basically says, "Yeah, we killed, but we kept mutant kind safe. Yeah, we had to do some bad things, but I would do it 100% again, and I do not regret it." And then Storm says, "Well, this is the last drink we're going to have as friends." So I like that source of friction. So also, this was my favorite part of the book, which is where, so it looks like all hope is lost. This mutant called, I think his name was, it was Bastion. He's going to kill Hope, but then Hope's mutant powers manifest, because to this point, we didn't know she had what her powers would be. What she does is she can imitate the powers of any mutant that's around her, and she can basically store them like a hard drive. And they're not temporary, so she can access these powers whenever she wants to. So what happens is that Bastion blasts her with a beam of energy, then she basically manifests the energy armor from the mutant Hisako codenamed armor. Then next, what I think was pretty cool, she freaking blasts Bastion with Cyclops' eye beams, and then This is where it's setting up AVX. During this battle, you start seeing like flaming birds and wings sort of manifest. Like at this panel, look at that. Very clearly the Phoenix. And at the end of the battle, so the X-Men have this big bonfire to celebrate the fact that, hey, we survived, because the mutant race was almost wiped out again. And then in the fire, Emma Frost notices this. So yeah, Phoenix. And this book basically sets up the Phoenix coming in. Now, another part that I really thought was pretty cool, and I liked the way they handled it, was previous in the storyline, the X-Men send a team to escort Hope to Utopia, and Utopia is like their island where they have where all of the mutants are based. So they want us to send a team to escort Hope to Utopia, while Cable and the others cause a distraction. So what they do is they take Rogue. So Rogue's powers is that if a mutant touches her, they they absorb her. She borrows their powers. So 5 mutants touch her, and then she ends up like this. At that point, I was like, "Oh yes, this is such a great idea! I can't believe no one's done that before." So that's a second coming, and that's a direct prequel, actually, to our next book, Avengers versus X-Men, a book that I just today finished reading. Now, Avengers versus X-Men I like because, first off, and I did the episode last week about who's better, the Avengers or the X-Men. This book tries to answer that question. It's written by Michael Bendis, Jason Aaron, Ed Brubaker, Matt Fraction, Jonathan Hickman. Art by John Romita Jr., Quapel, Andy Kubert, and Ryan. Is it Ryan Cho? And Frank Cho. And it's Adam Kubert. Now, and by the way, the second coming was like multiple writers and artists. Like, let me see. Okay, yeah, there's like a lot. I'll be for a long time doing this. Okay, so anyway, back to AVX. So again, it finally pits them against each other. Now, the whole idea is the Phoenix is coming, and that was established in Second Coming, and it's coming for Hope. She's going to be the new host. So the X-Men are concerned because, once again, if the Phoenix saga is going to be any example of this example, it's going to be an example of what happens when the Phoenix shows up. They're naturally concerned. And the X-Men don't know what's going to happen when the Phoenix shows up. If anything, they're more concerned because of the unknown. So what happens is the Phoenix is again, they get a notification that the Phoenix is showing up. The Avengers find out from Nova, and Nova is basically Marvel's version of a Green Lantern. Nova's the dude in the suit that Cap is helping up. Then what happens is, okay, so then the Avengers show up and say we have to take Hope into protective custody, and Cyclops is like, no, I-beam. He I-beams Cap, and then it starts this whole sort of superhuman civil war. Half the book is them just fighting the Avengers fighting the X-Men, and Wolverine is on the Avengers because he specifically understands what happens when you mess with the Phoenix. So the Avengers fight the X-Men on the moon. Tony Stark gets in this anti-Phoenix Iron Man suit, which basically looks like this, and shoots this anti-Phoenix cannon at the Phoenix. And what this eventually leads to is the Phoenix being split up among the Phoenix Five, which are Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Magic, Ileana Rasputin, and Colossus. So now you have the X-Men, these 5 X-Men who are powered by the Phoenix. So they return to Utopia and build an actual Utopia. It's not just some island that has some buildings on it. It's an actual Utopia. And so what Cyclops basically says is, Professor X, we're restoring, we're helping people this world. Like, we're turning arid places non-arid. We're feeding the hungry. We're providing water. We're providing free energy. So basically, this is kind of like a Marvel version of Injustice, in that the superheroes turn into dictators, but then sort of help the world in that they start doing a lot of good things so they can tell themselves, hey, we're doing good here. And the Avengers are totally out of their element because remember, the Avengers and the X-Men are still at war, and the X-Men are winning because they have the Phoenix powers. In fact, Hope is basically being held hostage. And the Avengers attempt like a military operation to get her out, and they get like shellacked. It wasn't until Scarlet Witch intervened that they were able to escape. And then that's when Cyclops ramps up his war with the Avengers, because he said they're constantly going to try and undo what we were doing. So we have to take out the Avengers, or at least stop them from posing a threat to us. And then we see throughout the storyline, the X-Men characters are starting to become more corrupted by the Phoenix. They start to behave more evil. Like Emma Frost burns Hawkeye alive. He survives because they're also able to heal. But like Namor is so much more aggressive. He attacks Wakanda. Then what they discover is that as one of them as each one falls, the fallen one's Phoenix powers are redistributed among the group. So the other group become more powerful, and that presents an issue for the X-Men, because they're like, even if we take out one, our job gets infinitely harder. So anyway, the brutality of the Phoenix groups eventually leads to the rest of the X-Men joining the Avengers side of the argument, in that everyone but the Five, including Magneto, join the Avengers fight against the Phoenix Five. And it's a pretty dope image, because Cyclops goes full bad, and then he attacks Emma Frost because he wants her Phoenix powers, and then he becomes the Dark Phoenix, which I need to get this image. I'm pulling up this image real quick, because it is like one of the coolest Phoenix designs ever. Look at that. Look at that. That is the Cyclops Phoenix. And he starts blasting fools. And then what it basically leads to is Hope becomes the Phoenix, and then her and Wanda basically banish the Phoenix away and say no more Phoenix. And what this leads to, the energy created by the banishing of the Phoenix leads to a reemergence of mutants, meaning what happened with House of M is undone, essentially. So anyway, I really liked this whole war. I like the references to Civil War, because at one point, so Cap and Iron Man are talking about their war with the X-Men, and Cap's like, well, I'm only trying to save the world. I'm doing the right thing here. And then Iron Man, of all people, tells Cap, let's not forget that shortly, like in the past, that like not too long ago, I was saying the exact same things, and you were on the opposite side. And then the story finally poses this great question, because back when the Avengers first show up at the Utopian island, what happens is Captain America goes, listen, we're just here to help. We just want to take her into protective custody. No one's arresting her. We just want to put her in protective custody so the Phoenix can't get to her. And Cyclops is like, yeah, right, like I trust you. And then Cyclops basically says, okay, so you plan to really care about us. Where were you when like Genosha happened, when like House of M happened, when like why aren't you like always like, you care about us, why are you allowing so many people to hate the mutants? Which is a perfect question. And in fact, Captain America answers that at the end of the story. He visits Cyclops in prison and basically goes, you were right about one thing on Utopia. You're right. I haven't really put that much into an effort into increasing public respect for the mutants, because Captain America has some sway on that. And this leads to him creating the Uncanny Avengers, which is basically a hybrid team of Avengers and X-Men. He has mutants on the Avengers. That's a way of like improving the public image of the group. So another thing I liked is, I haven't done anything for mutants. It's basically an Injustice style storyline, because in Injustice, Superman routinely says, I've made the world safe. And no one's like hungry or anything. I've solved world hunger. It's also like Secret Empire. This is like a pre Secret Empire, in that the X-Men essentially, let's say they make the world safer, they make they feed the hungry and all that stuff, but at what cost? Love that sort of twisting of the whole "it's for your own good" argument. So finally, my number one favorite X-Men storyline in recent history is House of X, Powers of 10 by Jonathan Hickman, art by Pepe Larraz and RB Silva. So, reason why I like this. Okay, so this is basically two complementary X-Men comic series that basically set up the Krakoan age of X-Men that we're currently in, the Hickman era of X-Men. And I believe just ended because he's leaving the book as soon as Inferno ends. I wonder if Inferno is going to undo all this. That'd be interesting. So what I like about House of X is that first off, it tells a story from 4 different timelines. So you have, I'm pulling up the storyline. So actually, I'm getting to that. I'll get to that point. So what I like is how now the mutants have decided, okay, so they're not going to let us coexist with them. Let's just form our own nation state. So what they do is they find the living island of Krakoa, which is on Earth for some reason, because I thought it was launched into space. And they establish the mutant nation of Krakoa and say, you have to accept us now, because Professor X says, okay, so we have all these drugs and herbs that will extend human life, cure Alzheimer's and stuff, and will make your life better. But I know that you'll never accept us, which at first was kind of jarring when I first read this. And then the story goes on and it explains it. So what happened was we have this lady named Moyra Mctaggart. She's been in X-Men storylines for like long time. She's one of the returning X-Men story, one of the people that's been in X-Men storylines since practically the beginning. What they retcon is that she's a mutant. Now, what her mutant power is that when she dies, she relives her past life. In other words, well, she doesn't relive. She sort of resets. In other words, she lives for a certain amount of time. She lives, dies, and then is born again, but in the past, meaning she goes back, she relives that life essentially, but she is fully sentient and knows about her previous life. So she's lived like 5 lifetimes, it's like 10 lifetimes at this point. And she knows that the mutants will never be accepted by humanity. So she basically goes to Charles Xavier early after he just had his dream of like mutant possession, admitting it was admitting it was a bad dream. So anyway, they basically retcon that at this whole time in X-Men storylines, even in this, Professor X knew that his dream was not going to happen. He was setting up the establishment of Krakoa, which has its own language. And that's another thing I like in this story. Throughout this book, what Hickman does, what he always does in his storylines, which I really like, is he adds in all these little lore sheets that basically explain more of the world. Like he has one that's like the language of Krakoa, which I'm trying to find here because I really like that image, that page. But anyway, and what this establishes is that I like how like Sabretooth is being tried for like murder. Emma Frost rolls in and says, okay, he's coming with me. We just negotiated a deal with your State Department that all the mutants have a diplomatic immunity. No mutant is going to be tried by human court. Which is like one of those things where I'm like, oh boy, that is some balls. Then what's interesting is that so Krakoa is recognized by the United Nations as a nation after a vote. Now, what they imply is that so some of the members of the UN, of the Security Council, or whoever votes on that, I think it was the UN. So anyway, so some of the nations weren't on board with Krakoa becoming a nation. So Emma Frost went in their minds and mind controlled them into saying yes or abstaining. So I think that's like really like, oh boy, that is some stuff. So here are the 3 timelines. So you have X1. I think it's X1. No, I think it's X0. X0 is like the past in that like Xavier creates his dream. Xavier has his dream. Moira tells him that that's not going to happen. They go recruit Magneto. All that stuff that happens pre like these books. And then we have X1, which is where the majority of the storyline takes place in the Krakoan era, where we have like it being established as a nation state, resurrection becoming a thing. I'll get into that in a second. And we have X3, which is showing the X-Men like the near future during like the reign of machines, because machines have taken over. That's normally what happens in like these future storylines where the humans create the Sentinel program. And the Sentinel program were like killer robots designed to kill humans, and they go full Skynet, surprising no one. And so they go full Skynet, and then what it shows is Wolverine and Apocalypse, actually, because in this timeline, Apocalypse leads the X-Men. They're basically trying to get information from this AI named Nimrod, which is a super sentinel. And the information is when Nimrod goes operational in the timeline. So what they do is they get that information at great personal cost, and they kill Moyra, but she goes back in time, so she has all this information in her head. But by back in time, I mean she dies and then she resets. But remember, she has all the memories from her previous lives. So that's how the X-Men are always one step ahead of their enemies in the X1's timeline. Then we have X4. That's kind of confusing, but it's basically talk about the near future of what's going to happen to the X-Men. It's the whole idea that like it's kind of confusing. I'm going to review this, and then we're going to do an actual like House of X, Powers of 10 breakdown. So it's filled with charts, which I really like. The art by Laraz and Silva is fantastic. So what they established also is that the X-Men have been resurrecting people from the dead. Now, the way they do this is that during the X-Zero timeline, which is like the past, Magneto and Professor X recruited Dr. Sinister, or like Professor Sinister, one of his names, I think it's Dr. Sinister, because he has cloning technology. So what they end up doing is they also retcon that Cerebro, the whole finding mutants, that was the secondary function of Cerebro. The primary function is that it creates a backup of the essence of every mutant. So what they do is they have these 5 mutants. I'm going to pull up the chart, the part of the storyline. So we have these 5 mutants, and these 5 mutants are Hope Summers, Gold Balls, or otherwise known as Egg, Proteus, Elixir, and Eva Bell. So what happens is, what Gold Balls does, now known as Egg, is that he emits these gold balls. He can like deploy these balls. So they thought they were balls, but they actually are eggs. Now what happens is Proteus warps reality slightly, so these eggs are now viable. Hope Summers injects the DNA of the fallen mutant into the egg. Now Elixir kickstarts the cellular replication process. Eva Bell speeds up time around the egg so that the embryo develops really fast. So they're at the age they were when they died. And then Hope Summers amplifies the other mutants' powers so that this all works. And then the mutants emerge from the eggs, but they're just a husk. They don't have any like energy, any like essence. So what Professor X does with Cerebro is he uploads the consciousness of these mutants into their bodies, and then they're resurrected. Because the mutants remember everything. They remember they died and all that. But I think that's really, really cool, because now death means not that much, nothing in terms of X-Men storylines. And another thing I liked is that, again, so this was an island for all mutants. So they recruit Apocalypse. Again, I already said that they mentioned Sinister, but every X-Men villain, including Sebastian Shaw, is essentially brought onto Krakoa and said, you have a place here. This is just for mutants. As long as you don't mess with us, we don't mess with you. You're just going to, as long as you don't break Krakoan law, you're totally welcome to live here. Now, what is Krakoan law, you may ask? Krakoan law is, there are 3 laws of Krakoa. Make more mutants, murder no man, except in self-defense, my man, the me, mankind, and respect Krakoa. Those are the 3 laws of Krakoa. So another point, okay, so let's see what else. So then, okay, I'm trying to get to, let's see, what else can we talk about with Hawks and Pox. So this is basically the setup for Dawn and now Reign of X. I believe there's going to be one more. I don't know how many arcs are in this Hickman storyline. I think they definitely modified it because he's leaving. So I wonder if he's going to leave and then the X-Men are going to go back to like being the superhero team instead of just these weird island nation people. But regardless, I like a lot of what Hickman did to the X-Men. I like his Avengers run. I very much like Dawn of X. And let's see. What else can I talk about with House of X or my favorite X-Men storylines in general? By the way, if you have any X-Men stories that you think I missed, I know I missed I know I didn't put Phoenix on the list, but that's just because I didn't read the storyline yet. When I do, I'll add it to the list. In other words, I'm going to do like check-ins to like see which have been my see if any of these lists change. So if you have an X-Men storyline or a storyline that involves the X-Men that you want to that you think is great, drop in the description. Tell me about it. Give me like a short description in the comments about like why you like this storyline and all that. So so these are some of like my favorite storylines actually in all of Marvel, and I've maintained this point before that the thing about Marvel is that most of its like well-known and big time storylines have in some way linked to the X-Men, which is what I meant beforehand, like in the beginning of this podcast when I said like Marvel really doesn't have as many well-known storylines as DC does, which I still maintain that point, by the way. But well, let me put it this way: pre-Krakoa, Marvel didn't do anything with the X-Men, anything interesting, because Fox has the movie rights to X-Men. So if Marvel can't make money off the movies, which they wouldn't be able to because again Fox owns the X-Men movie rights, they're not going to do that much stuff with them. So what eventually this leads to is a bunch of stale storytelling. And then they recently bought, and then when Disney bought Fox, Marvel was like, okay, Hickman, do whatever you want to do, man. It's all yours. And then, so I expected to have more Chris Claremont. I just haven't read that much yet. I'm still working through it. But I did like, let's see, some runners up would probably be Marvel Universe versus Wolverine, which starts this. It's basically a zombie apocalypse with Wolverine being the main antagonist, which I really like. Wolverine has to kill the entire X-Men team and most of the Marvel superheroes in order to escape New York. And then let's see, what other X-Men involved storylines do I really like? Well, I know the storyline of Phoenix, so that would be on there. It's just I didn't put it on there because this is only the ones that I've actually read. And let's see what else. I guess that's it. And those are all of my favorite X-Men stories. If you guys have any ones that you really enjoy and you think I missed and you think should be on the list, go ahead, drop them in the comments, and let's see what you guys come up with. All right, class out of session. Bye-bye, guys.